Agatha Raisin and Toni Gilmour's first murder case. Tonight in Carsely, trouble brews behind every polite smile, and Agatha Raisin is about to step straight into the heart of it. Settle in, pour a warm drink, and let the mystery begin. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. A thin, persistent drizzle drifted across Carsely, the sort that dampened spirits without the generosity of a proper storm. Agatha Raisin stood outside the WI hall, tightening her coat and cursing the frizz threatening her carefully styled hair. It was Toni Gilmour's fault she was there at all. The girl had breezed into the office that morning looking bright, capable, and infuriatingly youthful. Agatha had snapped, "Some of us still have a presence in the village, thank you very much," and now she was determined to prove it. Inside, the hall smelled faintly of lavender polish and damp wool. The usual faces were already arranged in neat rows of folding chairs. Mrs. Boggle with her accusing eyebrows, Mrs. Mason whispering behind a hand, and Mrs. Bloxby presiding with serene patience. Toni followed Agatha in, placing her umbrella in the corner with unruffled calm. Agatha, noticing the approving nods Toni received, felt a twinge of irritation. "Agatha, dear, you're presenting today," Mrs. Bloxby said warmly. "Indeed I am," Agatha replied, lifting her chin with defiance. "A simple floral arrangement, something modern." She stepped to the front table, where a shallow bowl, a clutch of roses, and a glossy magazine lay prepared. She had practiced earlier, or at least she had glanced at the picture. The roses looked droopy already, which she blamed on the weather. The ladies settled. Agatha began. "Now, you take your blooms." One rose head fell off immediately, plopping onto the table like a surrendering soldier. A ripple of amusement ran through the room. Agatha plunged on, and positioned them elegantly. She poured water into the bowl, too fast. A shining stream arced forward and splashed over Mrs. Boggle's lap. Mrs. Boggle shrieked as if assaulted with boiling oil. Toni rushed forward, grabbing the tablecloth to stem the flood. In her haste, she tugged too hard. The cloth slipped, dragging a small vase to the edge. Agatha lunged to save it, collided with the chair and nearly toppled herself. A murmur rose, amusement mixed with pity, the sound Agatha dreaded above all. Mrs. Bloxby intervened gently, patting Agatha's arm. "Let's perhaps move on to announcements." Agatha muttered. It looked easier in the picture, as she retrieved the decapitated rose head. Toni, composed as ever, rearranged the table and set everything straight with soft, efficient hands. Several WI ladies smiled approvingly. One whispered, "Such a capable girl." The comment stung worse than the laughter. Agatha folded her arms, watching Toni from under narrowed eyes. The girl didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Her very efficiency felt like a rebuke. As the meeting dispersed, gossip buzzed like flies around jam. Agatha pretended disinterest, but angled her ear toward Mrs. Mason and Mrs. Boggle. "He's hosting it tonight at the Red Lion," Mrs. Mason whispered. "A proper valuation evening. Leonard Pym himself." "Ghastly man," Mrs. Boggle said, still blotting her skirt. "Sharp as vinegar. Told me once my grandmother's brooch was faintly pitiful." Agatha sniffed. "Pym is an expert." "An expert in insulting people," Mrs. Mason replied. "They say he reassigns provenance when he fancies a bigger profit." Agatha caught Toni's expression, a quick tightening around the mouth. "Interesting." "Been to his shop lately?" Agatha asked lightly. Toni hesitated. "He wasn't very nice." "You let him push you about, did you?" Agatha said, with more bite than intended. Toni shrugged. "I just wanted advice. He made me feel stupid. It doesn't matter." Oh, it mattered. Agatha felt the familiar protective flare she got whenever someone underestimated Toni. Only Agatha was allowed to criticize the girl. Everyone else could mind their own business. Mrs. Bloxby approached with her gentle smile. "It will be a big night at the pub. The villagers love a chance to show off their treasures." "Treasures?" Agatha echoed. "More like attic rubbish." "Rubbish can cause quite the commotion," Mrs. Bloxby said. "I heard last year ended in a terrible row." That piqued Agatha's interest. "What sort of row?" "Something to do with a disputed miniature painting," Mrs. Bloxby replied. "Hard feelings all round." Toni slipped into her coat. "I'll walk back to the office," she said. "See you later." As Toni left, a WI member called out, "Goodbye, dear. You've such a bright future." Then, with that dreadful tone reserved for women of a certain age, she added to Agatha, "And you're marvellous. for keeping busy. Agatha stiffened. I'm not knitting tea cozies. I run a professional agency. Yes, yes, the woman said soothingly, as one might address a confused aunt. Agatha swept out, head high, cheeks burning. Outside, the drizzle had turned to a misty sheet, coating the village in a silvery gloom. Her umbrella, of course, chose that moment to turn itself inside out. She cursed, wrestled it back, and stomped toward home. Carsely, with its honeystone cottages and tidy hedgerows, looked maddeningly smug. Windows glowed softly as villagers prepared early suppers. A faint smell of wood smoke drifted from the vicarage. The WI hall behind her buzzed with renewed gossip. She could almost hear the phrases forming. Poor Agatha, trying so hard. Toni, such a fresh change. Fresh change indeed. Agatha lit a cigarette, ignoring the disapproving glance from a passing dog walker. The flame warmed her fingers, but not her pride. Halfway down the lane, she encountered Doris Simpson sweeping her doorstep. Doris eyed Agatha with interest. Off to the valuation tonight, Mrs. Raisin? Agatha sniffed. I might. Well, brace yourself, Doris said. Pym's tongue's sharper than a carving knife. Last year he called Mrs. Harris's porcelain a crime against craftsmanship. She nearly fainted. The man sounds delightful. People say things could get heated again tonight, Doris added, lowering her voice. Someone mentioned it might end in a row. That phrase again. Agatha's curiosity stirred like a cat sniffing movement under a cupboard. What's this row everyone keeps hinting at? Oh, I don't keep track of scandals, Doris said primly, a statement as unconvincing as if Hodge had claimed he didn't care for tuna. But someone said Pym came across a piece he shouldn't have had, something rare, caused a fuss. Agatha's detective instincts sharpened. What piece? No idea, Doris said, already itching to share with the next passer-by. But he's not as clever as he thinks. People talk. Agatha continued home, the drizzle clinging to her lashes. She felt bruised, not physically, but in that prickly, humiliating way only village life could manage. She wasn't old. Middle-aged, yes, but vibrantly so. Toni's quiet competence had shown her up. That was the worst of it. At her cottage, Hodge greeted her with a disdainful stretch across the hallway rug. He always seemed to embody the village's opinion of her, fond but faintly critical. Oh, shut up, Agatha told him, scooping him aside with her foot. He sauntered to his food bowl as if deeply offended. She hung her coat, poured herself a gin and tonic, and lit another cigarette. The drizzle had turned heavier now, pattering steadily against the window. Agatha watched it, her mind turning like clockwork. A valuation evening, a notorious antiques dealer, a row last year, Toni's humiliation at the shop, village resentment simmering like an old kettle. There was something there and a scent of trouble drifting through Carsely. Agatha smiled. Trouble suited her, and if the WI ladies thought she'd fade quietly into middle-aged irrelevance, they knew absolutely nothing about Agatha Raisin. Tonight, she decided, she would attend the valuation. Something told her Leonard Pym's big evening would not end peacefully, and Agatha, in spite of herself, was looking forward to it. A sharp, chilly evening settled over Carsely, the kind that sent smoke rising from chimney pots and pushed villagers toward warm lights and fuller pubs. Agatha Raisin marched toward the Red Lion with the brisk step of a woman determined to reclaim her dignity. Hodge had watched her leave with his usual disdainful yawn, which Agatha chose to interpret as encouragement. Carsely's only pub was bursting at the seams. Bodies pressed close, coats steamed in the heat, and half the village seemed to be waving some dusty relic aloft. The bar hummed with anticipation and mild desperation. Everyone wanted to be told they owned a treasure. Everyone feared being told they didn't. Agatha elbowed her way to the front row and established herself firmly on a wooden chair. If she was to restore her standing after the WI fiasco, she must be prominent, ideally admired, or at least not laughed at. Toni, trailing behind, slipped toward the bar with the resigned air of someone dragged into a pantomime under duress. "You could stand with me," Agatha called. Toni smiled faintly. "I'll see better from here." Agatha bristled. The girl was too polite by half. A hush rolled through the room as Leonard Pym emerged from the back door. Plump, polished and smug, he wore a waistcoat embroidered with tiny gold keys, as if to remind everyone he alone held the lock to true worth. He strode to a makeshift table set with a lamp and magnifying glass, then lifted his chin with theatrical disdain. "Good evening," he boomed. "Let us begin sorting treasure from tat, shall we?" A couple of villagers tittered nervously. Pym relished it. His first victim was a farmer holding a grandfather clock face. Pym peered, sniffed and pronounced, "Laughably fake. A poor Victorian reproduction pretending to be Georgian. Might fetch £20 if the buyer's half blind." The farmer's face reddened. Next came Doris Simpson's teapot. Doris approached in the posture of someone offering a newborn lamb. Pym glanced once, snorted. A mass-produced piece from the 1960s. No value beyond sentiment, and not much of that. Doris looked so crushed that Agatha nearly marched up to shake Pym's flabby shoulders. Instead, she muttered, "He needs a slap." A woman beside her nodded fervently. The blows kept falling. Agatha enjoyed it only when aimed at people she disliked, which was unfortunately rare. Pym's equal opportunity cruelty robbed her of the pleasure. Then Toni stepped forward, clutching an embroidered sampler. Agatha immediately sat straighter. She recognized the piece. Toni's grandmother had stitched it in the 1940s. Not valuable, perhaps, but certainly not rubbish. Toni offered it meekly. Pym raised an eyebrow. "Oh dear, amateur work. Sentimental nonsense. The stitching uneven, see? And the date is wrong by a decade." Agatha shot out of her chair. "It is not wrong. That's how they dated them in those days. Isn't it, Toni?" Toni looked startled. Pym fixed Agatha with a triumphant sneer. "Madam, the date placement is characteristic of mass-market copies sold in the 70s. I would know. You, clearly, would not." Laughter rippled. Agatha felt heat flood her cheeks. Toni murmured, "It's all right." But Agatha's humiliation rose like a tide. "You're a pompous bully," she snapped. "And you," Pym replied smoothly, "are out of your depth." Agatha sat, trembling with fury. Her fingers itched for a cigarette, but Bill Wong stood nearby nursing a pint. She didn't want another lecture from him about indoor smoking. Pym carried on, basking in his poisonous authority. He accepted a crystal decanter from Mrs. Mason, made a great show of examining it, then waved it aside with a sigh. "Modern reproduction, worthless." Mrs. Mason looked ready to faint. Agatha folded her arms, smouldering. The pub's air felt thick resentment, heat, damp coats, the sour smell of spilled ale. Pym thrived in it like mould on cheese. Then it happened. Pym reached for his glass, a tumbler he had sipped from throughout the evening. He took a swallow, paused, blinked and swayed. For a moment it seemed part of his theatrical style, but then his face drained of colour. His hand gripped the edge of the table. The magnifying lamp wobbled. "Mr. Pym?" someone called. He gasped, a wet, choking sound, then collapsed sideways. The table crashed to the floor. Villagers screamed, chairs clattered. Agatha rose sharply, her heart jolting. Bill Wong stepped forward at once, all quiet authority. "Everyone stand back," he ordered. "Give him air." But it was already clear. Pym wasn't moving. Whispers swelled. "Is he ill? He can't be dead, can he? Good heavens, should we call someone?" Bill knelt by Pym, checked his pulse, then looked grim. He stood slowly. "I'm afraid he's gone." A hush fell, so deep even the crackling fire sounded guilty. Toni stared, stricken. Agatha felt a peculiar thrill beneath the shock. Not joy, but the prickling instinct of a mystery unfolding. Bill raised his voice. "This may be suspicious. Nobody leave." Villagers froze mid-step. The Red Lion felt suddenly smaller. Agatha stepped forward. "Suspicious how?" Bill gave her a look of long-suffering patience. "Because he seemed healthy 5 minutes ago. And because—" He pointed to the tumbler lying on its side. "Someone's wiped the glass clean. No fingerprints. That is not normal behavior." Agatha stared at the glass. It glinted innocently under the lamp's glow. Wiped clean. Wiped deliberately. "Poison?" she whispered. "Possibly," Bill said, eyes narrowing. "We'll know more once the doctor arrives." The landlord hovered nearby, wringing his hands. "Nothing to do with my drinks, Sergeant, I swear." "We'll see," Bill replied. Toni approached Agatha, voice small. "Someone murdered him." "Looks like it," Agatha said. Her mind buzzed like an angry hive. Pym had insulted half the village tonight. Any of them could have slipped something into his glass. Toni swallowed. Poor man. Agatha raised an eyebrow. Really? Toni hesitated. Well, perhaps not poor, but still. Agatha's gaze swept the room. Villagers grouped into clusters, whispering feverishly. Fear, indignation, and morbid curiosity mingled in their faces. And something else. Defensiveness. People don't wipe glasses unless they have something to hide. She leaned close to Toni. This is our chance. Our chance for what? Toni whispered, horrified. To solve it before Bill does. Agatha, don't argue. You saw his face. He doesn't want us involved, which means we absolutely must be. Toni muttered, You're impossible, but she didn't walk away. Bill turned sharply. Agatha Raisin, stay out of this. She folded her arms with saintly innocence. I'm merely observing. Do not interfere. Of course not. She kindly refrained from adding, Interfering is practically my profession. Bill moved to organize statements, directing villagers to sit and wait. Some protested, but one look at Pym's still form shut them up. The pub felt colder, though the fire still burned. Agatha sank onto a chair beside Toni. Her pulse still thudded, the smell of overturned beer mixed with cheap perfume. A woman sobbed quietly. Another muttered that she had told her husband the evening would be trouble. Agatha leaned back. Did you notice anyone near Pym's glass? Toni shook her head. People crowded around. He kept putting it down wherever he pleased. Anyone could have reached it. And he insulted nearly everyone. Including you, Toni said gently. Agatha huffed. Hardly a motive. I've endured worse men. Yes, Toni murmured, but you usually threaten them. Only verbally. Across the room, Doris Simpson raised a trembling handkerchief. I didn't like him, but murder's a bit strong, she sniffed. Someone else muttered, he had enemies. Another added, too many to list. Agatha absorbed it all. The village was a stock pot simmering with resentment. Bill returned to the fallen glass, bending to inspect it. Agatha followed the angle of his attention. The wiping had been precise, too precise for panic. Someone had calmly erased evidence, a clue, a cold, deliberate clue. She allowed herself a thin smile. Murder in Carsely again, and she, Agatha Raisin, was in the front row. Bill straightened and caught her expression. No, he said, pointing a stern finger at her. She widened her eyes innocently. I haven't done anything. Yet, he said darkly. Agatha turned away, pleased. If Bill was already irritated, she must be on the right path. Outside, the drizzle thickened to rain. Inside, the villagers sat trapped with their fear and speculation, and somewhere among them sat a killer. Perhaps someone clutching a worthless heirloom, perhaps someone still flushed with Pym's insults. Agatha braced herself, her mind sharpening. Toni leaned close, whispering, What now? Agatha smiled. Now, my dear, we begin. A dangerous gleam lit her eyes, the gleam that told Carsely trouble was coming. Not that anyone ever listened. Carsely woke the next morning, buzzing like a disturbed hive. Rain had eased to a thin mist, leaving the hedgerows dripping and the cottages glistening faintly under a weak sun. Agatha Raisin stalked down the lane with purpose, cigarette clamped between her fingers, impatience in every step. She'd slept badly, dreams full of Leonard Pym's collapse and the smug faces of the WI ladies, and she was in no mood for dithering. Toni Gilmour hurried beside her, long strides keeping up with Agatha's determined march. I'm telling you, Toni said, I only came to work on the accounts today, not detective work. Nonsense, Agatha replied, exhaling a stream of smoke. You notice details. That makes you a detective. Honestly, the talent some people waste. I didn't say I had talent. Humility is overrated, Agatha snapped, especially before 9 in the morning. She pushed open the office door with unnecessary force. The place smelled faintly of old paper and yesterday's takeaway. Hodge had spent the night knocking pens to the floor, judging by the mess. Agatha flicked on the kettle and scowled at the answering machine, blinking like an accusation. Let me guess, she muttered. Villagers wanting to know if I killed Leonard Pym. Agatha, Toni murmured. Oh, please. They'd only be surprised it wasn't done sooner. As the kettle rattled to a boil, Agatha checked herself in the small mirror. Hair acceptable, mascara intact, face too pale but defiant enough. Toni organized the desk with quiet competence, irritating Agatha more with every tidy movement. "Right," Agatha declared. "We need statements." Toni blinked. "Statements? From whom?" "Everyone," Agatha said, thrusting a notebook into Toni's hands. "The village is probably queuing outside the pub already. Let's go before Bill bolsters his ego by telling us not to." Toni looked doubtful but followed. They found the Red Lion surrounded by a knot of villagers, all talking at once. The landlord stood at the door trying to maintain order, but gossip flowed faster than beer ever could. Agatha plunged into the crowd like a general entering battle. "Right, you lot," she barked. "Who actually saw Pym before he collapsed?" Several heads turned. A few stared at her with the sort of hesitant surprise usually reserved for unstable llamas. One brave soul said, "Mrs. Raisin, dear, perhaps let the police—" "The police," Agatha interrupted, "are busy organising paperwork. We are looking for facts." At her side, Toni attempted a softer approach. "If anyone has details, we'd be grateful. Just one at a time, please." Immediately the villagers relaxed. Faces softened. A ripple of cooperation spread like sunlight. Agatha felt a stab of jealousy so sharp she nearly dropped her cigarette. "Fine," she muttered. "Go on then." They began collecting accounts. Most were useless. Mrs. Mason remembered nothing but being insulted. Mr. Price insisted Pym had been wobbling all evening, though Agatha suspected that might have been wishful thinking. Doris Simpson repeated tearfully that her teapot was better than he said, which offered no help at all. Agatha struggled to keep her irritation buried. Toni, meanwhile, filled her notebook with crisp, neat statements, offering sympathetic nods and murmured encouragements. It irked Agatha that villagers who had barely tolerated her for years now melted at the sound of Toni's polite voice. "They adore you," Agatha muttered. "I should have brought you to Carsely years ago." "I'm not sure that's a compliment," Toni replied. A breakthrough came unexpectedly. Mrs. Blocksby approached with a gentle step, her expression thoughtful. "Agatha, Toni, you might want to know something I overheard yesterday." Agatha perked up. "Yes?" "Pym had 3 rather heated arguments before the valuation, one with Mrs. Swithins about her heirloom brooch. She insisted it was Victorian. He claimed it was Edwardian at best." "The nerve," Agatha muttered, though she privately had no idea of the difference. Mrs. Blocksby continued. "Then Malcolm Jenkin confronted him outside his shop, accusing Pym of forgery." "Forgery," Agatha repeated sharply. "Yes, Malcolm said Pym created value by wishful thinking. They nearly came to blows." "Interesting," Toni murmured, making a note. "And then," Mrs. Blocksby said softly, "Ivy Cartwright spoke to him behind the pub. I only saw a moment, but Pym seemed cold. Ivy looked upset." Agatha sniffed. "She served him his final drink, didn't she? That alone puts her on my list." Toni frowned. Her hands were shaking all evening. Agatha glanced at her, annoyed she'd missed that detail. "You noticed that, did you?" "Hard not to," Toni said. She dropped 2 glasses. Agatha chewed the inside of her cheek. The girl's observational skills were impressive, irritatingly so. She reminded Agatha of a younger, more capable version of herself, which she found both flattering and inconvenient. She marched toward the pub entrance. "We'll talk to Ivy first." Inside, the Red Lion felt oddly hollow. Chairs had been rearranged, the table cleared. Only the faint scuff marks on the floor hinted at the chaos of the night before. Ivy Cartwright stood behind the bar polishing glasses with a too brisk tempo, avoiding eye contact with anyone entering. Agatha approached like a hawk descending. "Morning?" Ivy flinched. "Oh, Mrs. Raisin, Toni." "We need a word," Agatha said. "About last night." Ivy's hands slowed. "I told Sergeant Wong everything." "And now you'll tell us," Agatha replied, as if this were a natural extension of police protocol. Toni intervened gently. "We just want to understand." Ivy swallowed hard. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "I didn't poison him." Agatha folded her arms. "Didn't say you did. Yet." Ivy stared at the polished glass in her hand, fingers trembling. Toni placed a steadying hand on her arm. The girl softened at the touch, though she still looked terrified. "I served him drinks, yes," Ivy whispered, "but I didn't touch the glass he brought with him. His own tumbler. He always carried it for tastings. Said it made everything taste truer." Agatha frowned. "So he poured from the pub's bottle into his own glass." "Yes," Ivy said, and he never let it out of sight. Except, she hesitated. Except, Agatha demanded, except when he went to inspect Mrs. Mason's decanter. He put his glass down. Someone could have reached it then. A small prickle ran through Agatha. She pictured the chaos. Villagers crowding forward, Pym barking insults, hands everywhere. The tumbler resting on the table in plain reach. Who was closest? Toni asked quietly. Ivy shook her head. It happened so fast. People kept moving, and he'd already argued with half of them earlier. Which half? Agatha asked. Mrs. Swithin's for one, Ivy said. She nearly cried when he dismissed her brooch. Malcolm Jenkin too. They shouted outside, and... She hesitated again. Yes? Agatha pressed. He'd been horrible to me for weeks, Ivy's voice cracked, mocking my dad's collection, saying I didn't know value from mud. Yesterday he said, something awful doesn't matter. Everything matters, Agatha snapped. Toni shot her a warning look. Agatha pretended not to notice. Did Pym acquire anything recently? Toni asked. Something unusual. A strange expression flickered across Ivy's face, part fear, part uncertainty. I don't know. People say things. What things? Agatha barked. That he had something new, something dangerous. Ivy flinched as she said it, as if afraid of the words. Tony's eyebrows lifted. Dangerous? Ivy shook her head. Just gossip. Probably nothing. Agatha didn't believe it. Something tight and dark twisted at the edges of Ivy's voice. Outside, the villagers' murmuring grew louder, like bees thickening around a hive. Agatha pushed open the door and inhaled the sharp, damp air. Her cigarette flared as she lit it, the smoke curling upward. Toni joined her. You were a bit hard on her. Nonsense, Agatha replied. She knows something. Did you see how she twitched at the word dangerous? Everyone twitches when you interrogate them, Toni said mildly. Agatha gave her a withering glance, which only made Toni smile faintly. They walked back toward the office, boots crunching on damp gravel. The smell of wet earth rose from the hedgerows. The tension in the village felt like a taut string ready to snap. Agatha exhaled smoke. Right. Pym argued with Mrs. Swithin's, Jenkin and Ivy, all in one day. That's 3 strong motives already. And the glass wasn't cleaned by accident, Toni added. Someone wanted their fingerprints gone. Agatha eyed her sideways. You're enjoying this? Toni looked shocked. No, I'm not. You are, Agatha said. You're becoming a detective whether you like it or not. Toni opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. Agatha felt an unexpected swell of affection. The girl was clever, and perceptive, and steady, all qualities Agatha liked to claim, with varying degrees of accuracy. Well, Toni murmured, I suppose someone has to keep you from getting arrested. Ha, Agatha said. Good luck with that. As they neared the office, Mrs. Boggle scurried past them, whispering loudly, he had it coming, of course, but murder. Who knew? Agatha watched her vanish around the corner. The mist had thickened again, wrapping Carsely in a soft shroud. Something dangerous, she murmured. Toni looked over. What are you thinking? Agatha flicked ash to the ground. That Leonard Pym didn't just insult the wrong people. He acquired the wrong thing. She stepped inside the office, the morning chill clinging to her coat, and felt the familiar spark of anticipation. A new clue, a dangerous rumour, a village full of suspects. And if Agatha had her way, she would unravel the truth long before Bill Wong sharpened his pencil. Later that morning, a grey, reluctant light hung over Carsely, the clouds low enough to sulk against the rooftops. Agatha Raisin stood at the bus stop tapping her foot, cigarette in hand, mood already sour. Toni waited beside her, neat as a school prefect, checking the timetable with patient eyes. The blasted bus is late, Agatha snapped. It's on time, Toni said. You're early. I am never early, Agatha retorted. The bus is late. Toni wisely said nothing. The drizzle thinned into mist, making Carsely's honeystone cottages look ghostly. Agatha gazed at the village with affection hidden under layers of annoyance. Somewhere in that tangle of hedges and gossip lay the motive for Leonard Pym's murder, and she meant to find it. The bus arrived at last, wheezing like an asthmatic horse, and they climbed aboard. Agatha took the window seat, wiping a small clear circle in the fogged glass. Toni sat beside her, holding her notebook with the devotion of a nun clutching scripture. Don't start writing yet, Agatha said. Just look alert. I am alert. Yes, but look it. They reached Mercester 20 minutes later. The town bustled with Saturday energy. Market stalls, tartan shopping trolleys, bicycles weaving perilously through the crowd. Agatha marched along the pavement toward Pym's Antiques, taking long strides that forced Toni to keep up. The shop crouched between a bakery and a chemist, its window crammed with tarnished silverware, dusty oil paintings and a rather alarming mannequin in Regency dress. A sign in the door read, "Closed for police investigation." Agatha rapped smartly. Bill Wong opened it with the expression of a man bracing for trouble. "I knew you'd turn up." "Of course," Agatha said calmly. "Crime waits for no one." Bill sighed. "You can have 10 minutes, under my supervision, and for the record, helpful civilians become nuisances very quickly." "Bill," she said sweetly, "I've never once been a nuisance." "That's a lie, and we both know it." He stepped aside before she could argue. Agatha swept in, Toni behind her, and the smell hit them immediately, a blend of old wood, mildew, and over-polished brass. The shop interior was dim, lit by scattered lamps that cast pools of yellow over crowded shelves. "Honestly," Agatha murmured, "it's like rummaging in your grandmother's attic after an earthquake." Bill gestured for caution. "Don't touch anything unless I say so." Agatha ignored him, peering at a shelf of porcelain figurines. "All overpriced rubbish," she muttered. Pym had a talent for charging twice as much as anything was worth. "He had customers," Bill pointed out dryly. "Fools exist everywhere," Agatha said. "Just look at politicians." Toni moved with more purpose. She scanned the counters, shelves, drawers. The dim lighting gave her face a thoughtful cast. Agatha watched her for a moment, grudgingly impressed. The girl didn't need theatrics. She simply saw things Agatha might have blustered past. "What are you looking for?" Bill asked her. "Patterns," Toni replied. "Patterns?" Agatha echoed. "This place barely has shelves." "Exactly," Toni said, moving toward the desk at the back. "If Pym kept anything important, it wouldn't be in the open." She pulled open a drawer and stilled. "Look," Agatha joined her. Inside lay a battered ledger, its corners frayed, pages thick with entries in Pym's spidery handwriting. Toni opened it gently, scanning names, dates, and valuations. Then she paused at one entry, brows knitting. "Here," she said. Agatha leaned in. "Blackwood miniature, private seller. Value, £5,000. She gave a low whistle. "Is he mad? No miniature is worth that." "A Blackwood miniature might be," Bill said quietly, "if it existed." Toni looked up. "It doesn't." "They were thought lost 20 years ago," Bill replied. "The Blackwood estate burned and the collection disappeared. Any surviving piece would be extraordinary and suspicious." Agatha felt a thrill. "So Pym had something rare. Something people might kill for, that's our motive." "Slow down," Bill said. "There's no proof. And Pym was involved in various dodgy deals. Many people disliked him." "But the miniature is missing, isn't it?" Toni asked. Bill hesitated. "We haven't found it." Agatha marched across the shop to a glass display case. Her reflection glowered back at her. Hair slightly frizzed, lipstick too bold for the morning light, expression fierce. She opened the case carefully. Inside were a jumble of pocket watches, brooches, and lockets. But on the velvet shelf, a space sat empty, its dust disturbed. "There," she said triumphantly. "Something sat here, something recently removed." Bill rubbed his temples. "You cannot deduce a murder from a dusty patch." "I can deduce anything," Agatha said. "It's a talent." Toni bent beside her. "She's right, though. Look, the surrounding items haven't been moved. Only that space is clean." Bill sighed heavily. "Fine. Noted. But this doesn't prove the miniature existed." "The ledger proves it," Toni said. Agatha beamed at her. "See? I told you. You are a detective." Toni flushed. "I'm just reading." Before Bill could speak, the door burst open. "Sweethearts, darlings, I heard the most outrageous thing." Roy Silver swept into the shop like a peacock blown off course by a gale. Dressed in a lime-green scarf and a coat with too many buttons, he commanded attention instantly. Agatha groaned. "Oh, Lord, why are you here?" "London gossip travels faster than plague," Roy declared, flinging his scarf dramatically. "Everyone in my office is screaming about poor, murdered Leonard Pym. They say he was involved in..." He lowered his voice to a scandalized whisper. Celebrity laundering. Toni blinked. What's that? Faking provenance for famous clients, Roy trilled, giving their tat glorious, unbelievable histories. Padding pockets everywhere. It's marvellous, really. Marvellously illegal, Bill muttered. Agatha rolled her eyes. Roy, must you exaggerate? I never exaggerate. Roy struck a pose. I merely enhance. Is any of this relevant? Bill asked. Everything is relevant, Roy said airily, especially when glamorous people are involved. Agatha watched him thoughtfully. Roy's rumour was dramatic, colourful, and wildly suspicious. But it had a fatal flaw. It was too entertaining. Real clues were rarely fun. Thank you, Roy, she said, patting his arm. Useless as always. Roy gasped. Agatha, I bring you London's finest whispers and you call me useless. I ought to be cherished. Not today, Agatha said. We're working. Roy pivoted to Toni. At least you appreciate me, darling. Toni gave a polite smile. It's nice to see you. There, Roy crowed, a girl with manners. Bill cleared his throat pointedly. Roy, if you're done, please leave. Roy sighed dramatically. Fine, but when the tabloids uncover everything, remember who warned you. He swept out, scarf fluttering like a wounded bird. Agatha looked at Toni. Red herring. Definitely, Toni agreed. Too theatrical. Unlike me, Agatha said proudly. Bill gave her a look. You are the definition of theatrical. Agatha ignored him, turning to inspect the room again. She imagined Pym here yesterday, smug, greedy, cataloguing his treasures, perhaps touching the miniature with a grubby finger, perhaps boasting to the wrong person. Her eyes drifted to the ledger again. Private seller, she murmured. Who? Toni scanned the pages. No name, just an initial. What initial? Agatha asked. An M. M for murderer, Agatha declared. Or M for Malcolm Jenkin, Bill countered. He deals in high-value pieces, and he accused Pym of forgery this week. Agatha felt her pulse quicken. He claimed the miniature was his. He claimed something was stolen, Bill corrected. Same thing. No, it isn't. Agatha waved him away. Details. You said yourself he was angry. Anger is not guilt, Bill said patiently. Agatha lit another cigarette. Anger plus opportunity plus motive often equals guilt. I read that somewhere. On a mug, probably. She blew smoke in his direction. Toni wandered toward a small writing desk. Papers lay scattered, but one envelope caught her eye, thick parchment with a dark smear on its edge. Agatha, she called softly. Agatha joined her. The envelope bore no name, just a wax seal broken clumsily. Inside was a folded sheet listing items for private appraisal. At the bottom, scribbled in Pym's hand, discuss Blackwood piece discreetly. Dangerous interest. Agatha felt a tingle of triumph. Dangerous interest. Ivy said that phrase yesterday. Toni nodded. But she seemed scared of it. Bill took the paper, frowning. I don't like this. If someone believed Pym had the miniature, they'd kill for it, Agatha finished. Or steal it, Bill said. Or both, Toni murmured. Agatha snapped her fingers. We need to speak to Malcolm Jenkin immediately. Bill raised a hand. You'll do no such thing without me. Of course not, Agatha said. You will not go alone. Naturally. You will wait for me. Certainly, Bill sighed. You're already planning to ignore me. Agatha smiled. Bill, darling, it's like you're psychic. Outside, the clouds darkened, casting the shop in a gloomy shade. The missing miniature hung over them like a ghost, unseen, valuable, and dangerous. Agatha stepped toward the door, coat swinging. Come on, Toni, we've work to do. Bill called after them. Agatha, I mean it, don't interfere. She shut the door on his warning. Where to first? Toni asked. Malcolm Jenkin's warehouse, Agatha said. People say they saw him skulking near the shop after hours, and I want to know why. They walked into the thickening drizzle, the air cool and sharp. Agatha lit another cigarette, satisfaction curling in her chest. A missing miniature, a private seller with an initial M, a dangerous interest, and Agatha Raisin, inconvenient, unstoppable, heading straight toward trouble again. A sharp wind swept across Mercester's industrial estate, whipping grit along the pavement and tugging at Agatha's coat as she marched toward Malcolm Jenkin's warehouse. The sky above was a slab of dull pewter, threatening rain. Agatha lit a cigarette in defiance of the weather. Toni, walking beside her, tucked her scarf neatly into her jacket, looking far more composed than anyone had a right to in such bleak surroundings. "Why are murder suspects always in depressing places?" Agatha muttered. "Perhaps depressing places attract depressing people," Toni offered lightly. "Or perhaps Pym annoyed everyone from here to Birmingham," Agatha replied. Jenkins' warehouse loomed ahead, an ugly metal structure with a peeling sign that read, "Jenkin Antiques, Restoration and Valuation." The irony of the word valuation after Pym's pompous display was not lost on Agatha. She pushed the door open without knocking. The interior was dim, lit by a handful of overhead strips that flickered with a half-hearted buzz. Rows of shelving units stretched into the shadows, stacked with battered chests, cracked porcelain, brass candlesticks, and artifacts in varying states of decay. The air smelled of old wood, stale varnish, and the faint tang of resentment. Malcolm Jenkin emerged from behind a stack of crates with an expression like thunder. His thin frame seemed made of angles. His dark suit, worn at the elbows, hung off him like a discarded coat rack. His eyes narrowed when he saw them. "You," he spat. Agatha lifted her chin. "Yes, me, Agatha Raisin, and this is Toni, my associate." "You mean babysitter?" Jenkins sneered. "If I needed a babysitter," Agatha snapped, "I certainly wouldn't choose someone whose warehouse smells like mouldy regrets." Toni shot her a warning glance. Agatha pretended not to notice. Jenkin folded his arms. "State your business." "Leonard Pym," Agatha said, savouring the slight flinch her words triggered. "He died last night. Poisoned." "I heard," Jenkin muttered. "Good riddance." "Not exactly the reaction of an innocent man," Agatha said sharply. "Oh, spare me," Jenkin retorted. "If feeling relieved makes me a murderer, then half the village should be locked up." Toni stepped forward gently. "We're just trying to understand what happened. We heard you argued with him yesterday." "Argued?" Jenkin barked. "I should have throttled him. The man stole from me." Agatha froze. "Stole?" "The miniature," Jenkin hissed. "The Blackwood miniature. It belonged to me." Toni opened her notebook. "How did Pym get it?" "He conned me," Jenkin said. His voice trembled with fury. "He came to my warehouse under some false pretense, pretending to admire some ugly candlesticks. He asked to see my more valuable items. He saw the miniature, a real one, mind, and later insisted I'd undervalued something he'd shown me. He tricked me into swapping pieces. Sleight of hand. By the time I realized, he'd already left." Agatha raised an eyebrow. "That seems elaborate." "Pym was elaborate," Jenkins snapped, "and greedy and cunning." "And you confronted him yesterday morning," Toni prompted. "I did," Jenkins admitted. "I demanded it back. He laughed in my face, said I couldn't prove it was mine. Said provenance was a slippery thing, the bastard." Agatha's pulse quickened. "So you visited him the morning he died. How convenient." "I didn't kill him," Jenkins spat. "If I had, I'd have done it years ago." Toni, with her maddening calm, asked, "Where were you last night?" "Here," Jenkins said. "Working. I had deliveries." "Anyone who can confirm that?" Toni pressed. "My driver," he replied. "And the log. And CCTV from the yard, if you must." Agatha blinked. "CCTV?" "Just for the loading bay," Jenkins said grudgingly. "I'm not stupid." "Debatable," Agatha murmured. Jenkins shot her a glower. Toni stepped in again. "Did you know Ivy Cartwright?" Toni asked. Jenkins stiffened. "The barmaid?" "Yes. Her father collected Blackwood pieces, or so he claimed. I told him some were worthless. He didn't like that." "We heard Ivy visited Pym privately," Toni said. "She did," Jenkin replied. "She came here too, asking about her father's collection after he died. Nice girl, but she had stars in her eyes. Thought Pym could give her answers." "And did he?" Agatha asked. "He gave her lies," Jenkin growled. "Pym lied for sport. If he told her anything, it was only to manipulate her." "So she had motive," Agatha announced with triumph. Toni hesitated. "But she seemed terrified yesterday, not angry." "Guilt can look like fear," Agatha snapped. "So can innocence," Toni murmured. Agatha shot her a look but said nothing. Jenkins stalked past them toward a shelf of porcelain figures. "Look around you. This is my livelihood. Pym tried to ruin it. He mocked every item he didn't want to steal." Agatha reached out to inspect a vase, a delicate thing with painted stags. "Careful," Jenkin barked. Agatha jerked her hand back, clipped another vase, and sent it wobbling dangerously. Toni sprang forward, steadying the porcelain with both hands. "Honestly, Agatha," she said gently. "I knew I wasn't going to drop it," Agatha lied. Jenkin muttered. "Pym's real enemy wasn't me. It was vanity and greed." Agatha narrowed her eyes. "Are you suggesting someone else was greedy?" "Everyone in this business is greedy," Jenkin said. "Collectors, dealers, sellers, even buyers. Everyone wants more than they have." "Especially murderers," Agatha noted pointedly. "Believe what you like," Jenkin snapped. "But I didn't poison him. I only wanted what he stole." Toni stepped closer. "When you asked him about the miniature yesterday, did he admit having it?" "Not directly," Jenkin said, "but he smirked. That was enough." Agatha caught the flicker of pain beneath the anger. Malcolm Jenkin was not a good man, but he was a man humiliated, and humiliation could spiral into motive. "Why were you near Pym's shop after hours?" Agatha demanded. Jenkin froze. "Who said I was?" "A villager," Agatha said smugly. "People see things." He scowled. "I was looking for him. I wanted to confront him again, but he wasn't in. I had deliveries, so I left." "At what time?" Toni asked. 6:30. "And the poisoning happened around 8, Toni said thoughtfully. Agatha hated how reasonable she sounded. "So your timeline fits, unfortunately." "Check my logs," Jenkin insisted. "Check the yard cameras. I'm telling you the truth." Agatha turned away, annoyed that he might be innocent. Innocent suspects were such a waste of perfectly good suspicion. "We're done here," she snapped. As they headed for the door, Jenkin called after them. "If you find that miniature, tell me it's mine." Agatha stepped into the chill wind, muttering, "Over my dead body." Toni wrapped her scarf tighter. "He's angry, but I don't think he's guilty." "Angry as motive." "So is fear," Toni said softly. "And Ivy looks more frightened than Malcolm." Agatha paused. The truth of that irritated her. "Come on," she said briskly. "We need fresh eyes on this. Mrs. Bloxby will know something." The bus ride back to Carsely was quieter. Agatha brooded, replaying Jenkin's words. Toni watched the fields outside, their winter-brown stretches peppered with sheep like scattered cotton. Back in Carsely, they walked toward the vicarage. Mrs. Bloxby answered the door with her serene smile, as if she'd been expecting them. "You look troubled," she said. "We are," Agatha replied. "Malcolm Jenkin claims Ivy was visiting Pym privately. Something about her late father's collection." "Ivy did seem distressed recently," Mrs. Bloxby said. "But she's a gentle girl. I can't imagine her harming anyone." "Distress can curdle," Agatha said. Mrs. Bloxby hesitated. "There is someone else who's been acting strangely. Nora Tudge." Agatha blinked. "Nora Tudge? The woman who collects ornaments shaped like cats?" "Yes. She bought something from Pym days ago. She claimed it was practically worthless, but she hid it in her shopping bag like contraband. And she's been anxious." "Anxious?" Toni asked. "She nearly jumped when I greeted her in the shop," Mrs. Bloxby said. "Something is weighing on her." Agatha felt a familiar surge of excitement. "Where is she now?" "At home, I imagine," Mrs. Bloxby replied. "She rarely goes out in the rain." Agatha glanced at the darkening sky. Drizzle had returned, light but persistent. "Right," she announced. "We're going to see Nora Tudge." Toni nodded, though her expression was uncertain. "Agatha, do you think Nora could be involved?" Agatha lit a cigarette, shielding it from the drizzle. "In a village murder, everyone is involved." They walked down the lane, the smell of wet earth rising with each step, the hedgerows rustling lightly. Toni walked close at her side, her voice low. "The miniature connects them all, doesn't it?" "Yes," Agatha said. "Jenkin owned it. Ivy's father collected similar pieces, and Pym might have stolen it," Toni finished. "Or lied about having it," Agatha added. "The man lied as easily as breathing." Toni hesitated. "And the person who has it now could be desperate," Agatha said. They reached Nora Tudge's cottage, a squat little place with lace curtains and a garden of overstuffed pots. A light glowed inside. Agatha crushed her cigarette and stepped forward briskly. "Let's see what secrets Nora's hiding," she murmured. And behind her, the drizzle thickened, as if the sky itself knew trouble was about to brew in Carsely yet again. A fine drizzle coated Carsely like a thin veil as Agatha and Toni made their way toward Nora Tudge's cottage. The hedgerows dripped steadily, and the lane glistened with puddles, each one reflecting the glum sky. Agatha walked briskly, cigarette in hand, her thoughts racing. Toni kept pace, hands deep in her coat pockets, expression watchful. "Nora Tudge," Agatha muttered. "Who'd have thought she'd be mixed up in anything suspicious?" "Everyone's mixed up in something," Toni said gently, "especially when Pym was involved." "True," Agatha conceded. "He had a particular gift for creating enemies." They turned the corner toward Nora's cottage, a squat little place with overgrown lavender pots, lace curtains, and a garden gnome that looked perpetually horrified. Smoke curled from the chimney, suggesting someone inside was at least attempting comfort. Agatha knocked smartly. After a moment, the door creaked open. Nora Tudge peered out like a timid dormouse, eyes wide behind her smudged spectacles. Her grey cardigan was buttoned unevenly, and her wispy hair was pinned in a style that suggested multiple attempts. "Mrs. Raisin?" she squeaked. "And Toni? Oh dear, have I done something wrong?" "Not unless you murdered Leonard Pym," Agatha said cheerfully. Toni shot her a warning glance. Nora went pale. I didn't," she stammered. "Oh my goodness." "Relax," Toni said softly. "We just want to talk." Reluctantly, Nora stepped back. "Well, come in then." The cottage interior was a chaos of knick-knacks, shelves bursting with porcelain cats, embroidered cushions on every chair, doilies draped like snow everywhere. The carpet pattern seemed designed to camouflage dropped biscuits. A kettle whistled in the kitchen, releasing a faint smell of bergamot. "Tea?" Nora asked. "Lovely," Toni replied. "Yes, fine," Agatha added, brushing a crocheted blanket off the chair before sitting. Nora bustled into the kitchen, clattering cups. Agatha surveyed the room. It resembled the aftermath of a charity shop explosion. She spotted at least 6 cat figurines staring at her accusingly. Hodge would have hated the competition. Toni leaned toward her. "Go gently." "I am gentle," Agatha whispered defensively. Toni murmured. Nora returned carrying a wobbly tray with mismatched cups, one chipped, one painted with roses, one sporting a faded slogan, "Bristol Cultural Festival 1978. She set it down with trembling hands. Agatha noticed something then, a small square of velvet peeking from beneath a crocheted doily on the table. Toni noticed it too. Their eyes met briefly. Agatha decided to wait. Toni's technique was softer and less likely to send Nora into hysterics. As tea was poured, Nora fussed with the pot, stirring anxiously despite it being unnecessary. "I suppose you'll hear about what I bought from Pym," she whispered. "Yes," Toni said gently, "if you're comfortable telling us." Nora's thin shoulders hunched. "It was silly of me. He said it was nothing special, practically worthless. But he said I should buy it because... Her voice cracked. Agatha leaned in, tone unexpectedly soft. "Because what, Nora?" "Because if I didn't," Nora whispered, "he'd tell everyone about my late Harold's debts." Tears welled. She dabbed them with a crumpled tissue. "Harold liked to collect little trinkets, you see. He was always buying things, sometimes more than we could afford." Agatha's chest tightened. She knew all too well the sting of private shame made public. "Pym threatened to expose him," Nora continued. "Said people would think Harold had been dishonest. I couldn't bear it. So I bought whatever he waved at me. Dozens of silly things." Toni's voice was warm. "What did he sell you most recently?" Nora sniffed and reached beneath the doily. She pulled out the velvet box. "This." She opened it. Inside lay a tarnished locket, small, oval, dulled by age. Agatha inspected it. Not the miniature, not even close. "He said this was worthless?" "Yes," Nora said, twisting her fingers. "He charged me £50 for it. Said it once belonged to someone nearly interesting." "The man was outrageous," Agatha said. "Did you see anything else?" Toni asked. "Something more valuable, something he hid?" Nora shook her head vigorously. "Oh no, he only ever showed me cheap things. Said Harold would have appreciated them. I didn't want them, but I couldn't let him ruin Harold's memory." Toni placed a gentle hand on Nora's arm. "You didn't do anything wrong." Nora gave a watery smile. "I try to collect only nice things. Harold always said they made the house feel warm, but I suppose I let it get out of hand since he passed." Agatha glanced around. "Just a bit." Toni elbowed her subtly. Agatha coughed. "But charming, very charming." Did Pym ever mention a miniature? Toni asked. A small painting. Nora hesitated. No, I never saw one, but... She paused, eyes widening. Oh, I did hear him brag about something. Agatha leaned forward. Brag how? He was on the phone, Nora said. In his shop. I stopped by to pay him. He charged interest if one was late. Her face crumpled with shame. He said he had the perfect little picture, a real beauty. He said he'd sell it privately to someone who knew its worth. Agatha's eyes lit. There it is. Proof he had the miniature. He didn't name it, Nora said quickly. Just said it was a perfect little picture. Close enough, Agatha replied. Nora's voice grew smaller. Please don't tell anyone about Harold's debts. People in Carsely talk. Agatha's features softened. They talk anyway, but your secret's safe, Toni nodded. Of course, Nora dabbed her eyes again. I'm sorry, I can't help more. You've helped plenty, Toni said warmly. Agatha rose, careful not to knock over a row of porcelain cats. One last question. Did you see Ivy Cartwright recently? The barmaid, Nora asked. Yes, she was crying behind the pub last night. Poor thing, I didn't want to intrude. Agatha froze. Crying? Nora nodded. Terribly. She bolted into the alley when she saw me. Toni's expression sharpened. That's important, Agatha agreed, though irritation pricked her. Toni had spotted the emotional nuance before she had. Thank you, Nora, Toni said, gathering her notebook. Take care of yourself, Agatha added, in the stiff tone of someone unused to comforting others. They stepped outside into the cool drizzle. Nora's door clicked closed behind them, leaving them on the narrow path leading back to the lane. Agatha lit a cigarette immediately. Right, Ivy's hiding something. She's frightened, Toni corrected. Fright often means guilt. Or trauma, Toni said quietly. She might be overwhelmed. Overwhelmed people don't run crying into alleys, Agatha argued. Toni gave her a look. Agatha, you run into alleys shouting, not crying. Doesn't make you guilty. Agatha opened her mouth, then shut it. Fair point. The drizzle thickened into a light rain, pattering gently on their coats. Carsely's cottages glowed warm through misted windows, and the smell of wet earth rose like steam. The W.I. Hall loomed to their right, its windows fogged with activity and gossip humming inside, at least in Agatha's imagination. Nora's motive is strong, Agatha said, blowing smoke. Blackmail, humiliation, extortion, that's prime murder territory. But she never attends evening events, Toni reminded her. She wouldn't have been near the pub. Agatha grumbled. Red herrings were such a nuisance, almost as bad as being wrong in public. Still, she said, she heard Pym boast. Someone else must have heard too. Ivy, Toni said softly. Agatha flicked ash. Yes, Ivy. Question is, why was she crying last night? Shock, Toni suggested. Guilt, Agatha countered. Compassion. Cowardice, Toni sighed. You've decided she's guilty, haven't you? Not entirely, Agatha said. Only mostly. They walked toward the village centre. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. The church bell chimed the hour with lazy indifference. Pym threatened Nora with Harold's debts, Toni said thoughtfully. If he was willing to blackmail her, he probably did the same to others. He bullied everyone, Agatha said, especially people who couldn't fight back. Including Ivy, Toni murmured. Her father's collection. He might have cheated them too. Agatha felt a grudging stir of sympathy for Ivy, promptly crushed by suspicion. They passed Doris Simpson's cottage. The curtains twitched. Doris opened the door with suspicious eagerness. Mrs. Raisin. Toni, you're out investigating again, I see. Agatha rolled her eyes. I might be. Doris leaned closer. Well, I saw that Ivy Cartwright crying behind the pub. Terrible state she was in. Why? Agatha asked. Didn't say, Doris sniffed, but she jumped like a guilty cat when she noticed me. Thank you, Doris, Toni said kindly. Doris beamed at her. Such a polite girl. You're lucky to have her, Mrs. Raisin. Agatha muttered something incoherent and strode away before Doris could elaborate. Once they rounded the corner, Toni laughed softly. You hate when people compliment me. I do not, Agatha snapped. You do, Toni said gently. It's sweet. Nothing about me is sweet, Agatha declared. That's also untrue, Toni murmured. Agatha pretended she hadn't heard. They approached the main road. The Red Lion's sign swung slightly in the wind. The memory of Pym collapsing flashed through Agatha's mind. Sudden, dramatic, almost theatrical. Poison disguised as chaos. "The miniature," Agatha said, thinking aloud. "It binds all the threads. Nora heard him brag. Jenkin claims it was stolen. Ivy's father was connected to the Blackwood pieces." "And someone wiped the tumbler," Toni added. "That wasn't Nora, and it wasn't Jenkin." "So who had the chance?" Agatha murmured. "Who had the courage?" Toni countered. Agatha stopped walking. A thin ribbon of rain trickled down her fringe. She stared toward the pub. "We need to talk to Ivy," she said. "Properly this time." Toni exhaled. "Yes, but gently." Agatha nodded, surprising herself. "Gently," she repeated. They resumed walking, shoes clicking on the wet pavement. Clouds churned above, heavy with more rain. As they neared the office, Agatha glanced sideways at Toni. The girl's quiet steadiness had become essential, though Agatha would rather chew gravel than admit it aloud. "You did well today," she said grudgingly. Toni smiled. "So did you." "Obviously," Agatha replied, lighting another cigarette, "but I appreciate you saying it." A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the faint sound of Hodge's distant yowl as they approached Agatha's cottage. The cat sat in the window, staring out with disdain, as if fully aware that the village murder investigation was becoming complicated, and that Agatha Raisin, for all her bluster, was knee-deep in trouble again. A thin, spiteful drizzle darkened Carsely's high street, as Agatha Raisin marched toward the Red Lion with the determination of a general advancing on enemy territory. Her coat flapped behind her like a battle flag. Her heels clicked with righteous purpose. Toni Gilmour, walking beside her, wore the expression of someone escorting a mildly explosive device. "You don't need to storm in," Toni murmured. "I'm not storming," Agatha snapped. "I'm striding. There's a difference." "Striding loudly," Toni said. Agatha sniffed. Loudness was sometimes necessary, especially when questioning murder suspects who thought tears could disguise guilt. She pushed open the Red Lion's door. The warm pub air, thick with beer, detergent and wet coats, washed over them. Afternoon regulars nursed pints, murmuring in tight circles. Conversations paused the moment Agatha entered. "Oh, Lord," someone muttered. "She's back." Agatha ignored them. "Where's Ivy Cartwright?" A man at the bar raised his eyebrows. "Behind the counter, Mrs. Raisin. Don't frighten her." "Frighten? I am the picture of calm," Agatha said, marching forward like precisely the opposite. Ivy stood polishing glasses with frenetic energy, her cheeks blotchy, eyes shadowed. The girl looked like a sparrow who'd been caught in every storm of the season. When she saw Agatha, her hand trembled so violently she nearly dropped the glass. "Mrs. Raisin," Ivy croaked, "I don't want any trouble." "That's unfortunate," Agatha said, "because trouble follows murder, Ivy, and murder followed Leonard Pym." Toni stepped between them before Ivy collapsed out of sheer panic. "We only want to talk," she said gently, "about your father and the miniature." Ivy's eyes widened. "No, I don't want to. I shouldn't." "Then let's sit," Toni said soothingly. Agatha bristled. She had planned a formidable interrogation, but Toni's gentle approach had a way of softening every sharp corner of the village. Ivy, trembling like a leaf, allowed Toni to guide her to a booth. Agatha dropped into the opposite seat with the grace of a disgruntled cat. "Start from the top," she commanded. "Pym cheated your father, didn't he?" Ivy flinched. "He didn't cheat him exactly. He tricked him. My dad wasn't well toward the end. Pym. He made him feel clever. He said Dad had a rare miniature, a Blackwood piece." Agatha's pulse quickened. The miniature again. Toni nodded gently. "And your father sold it?" "He thought Pym was helping," Ivy whispered. "Pym promised to mount it and sell it at auction. He said it'd pay off Dad's medical bills." "But he kept the profit," Agatha said flatly. Ivy swallowed. "Most of it. He gave Dad £50, said it was the best he could get." Agatha felt her eyebrows shoot upward. £50? For a miniature worth thousands. "That man deserved poisoning," she muttered. "Agatha," Toni warned. "I mean legally," Agatha lied, poorly. Ivy's hands twisted in her apron. "Dad died thinking he'd been clever. I didn't tell him the truth. Couldn't. After he passed, I found the receipt Pym had written. The miniature had been valued far higher. I confronted him last year. He laughed, said I had no proof, said my father had been gullible as butter. Agatha gripped the edge of the table. He said what? It doesn't matter now, Ivy said, voice breaking. I inherited the miniature, you see. Dad bought it years ago from Pym. He thought he'd got a bargain. Dad never knew Pym had actually bought it from someone else before that. I didn't know what to do with it. So you took it to Pym, Toni said softly. Ivy nodded miserably. Last week. I shouldn't have, but I needed money. He told me it was worthless, that it was just a faded trinket. I thought he might be lying, but I didn't know. He was lying, Agatha said. Tears welled in Ivy's eyes. Then 2 days ago he wrote to me, told me he had re-evaluated the piece and wanted to discuss a private buyer. I knew what that meant. He was planning to sell it behind my back. Of course he was, Agatha said. Men like Pym don't reconsider anything unless profit is involved. I confronted him yesterday, Ivy whispered. Agatha leaned forward, the scent of cigarette smoke clinging to her coat. What did you say? I told him I wanted it back. He refused. He laughed again, louder this time. Said I was too sentimental. I knocked over the cream jug. It spilled across his papers. He screamed at me. Said I was a stupid girl. She broke off, covering her face. Toni reached across the table, squeezing her hand. You didn't poison him. Ivy shook her head fiercely. I didn't, I swear. I left just before the valuation. I couldn't face the crowd. I went to the kitchen to cool off. Ask anyone. They all saw me cleaning glasses. Agatha tapped her chin. Several did. Annoying, but true. I only wanted my father's miniature back, Ivy whispered. That's all. If you didn't poison him, Agatha said, who did? I don't know. Ivy hesitated, then added in a trembling whisper, but I saw something, just before everything went mad. Agatha leaned forward. Well? Pym accepted a drink from someone, Ivy whispered, from someone he'd never have trusted normally. Toni's brow furrowed. Who? Ivy hesitated so long Agatha nearly burst. Finally she whispered, Charles Fraith. Agatha blinked. Charles? Charles gave him a drink? Yes, Ivy said, a cordial, in a fancy bottle. I saw him hand it over. Pym actually thanked him. He never thanks anyone. Agatha sat back, surprised enough to forget she was annoyed. Charles Fraith was lazy, charming, and occasionally idiotic. But a murderer? Are you sure? Toni asked gently. Positive, Ivy said. He said it was a gift to liven up the evening. Agatha snorted. That sounds like him. But Charles wouldn't poison anyone, Toni added. Agatha cleared her throat. Well, I didn't say that. I'm simply considering options. Toni gave her a look. Agatha. Fine, Agatha said. He probably didn't, but the drink is important. Ivy's hands twisted again. I shouldn't have told you. Charles is kind. He tips well. I don't want to get anyone in trouble. Agatha fixed her with a stern, almost maternal gaze. Ivy, listen to me. Someone murdered Leonard Pym. They used a glass wiped clean of fingerprints. Whoever did that was calm, precise, and familiar enough with him to get close. Ivy nodded faintly. I understand. Good, Agatha said. She stood abruptly. Come on, Toni. Toni rose with a soft smile at Ivy. Thank you. You've helped more than you think. Ivy blinked rapidly, tears threatening again. I didn't poison him, she whispered. I know, Toni said gently. I don't, Agatha added, then quickly softened her voice. But I do believe you didn't mean harm. There's a difference. They left the pub, stepping into cooler air. The drizzle had eased into a damp mist that clung to hair and trousers. Carsely felt unusually quiet, as if the village itself were eavesdropping. Toni exhaled. You were a bit hard on her. I was firm, Agatha corrected. Softness solves nothing, except cushions. Toni laughed softly. They walked down the lane, boots splashing through shallow puddles. The hedgerows whispered in the breeze. Somewhere behind them, the pub door creaked shut. Agatha lit a cigarette, the flare briefly illuminating her face. Charles Fraith, she muttered. Of all people. He wouldn't poison Pym, Toni insisted. He's too useless, Agatha offered. Gentle, Toni corrected. Ha! Have you ever seen him drive when he's late? Agatha countered. Dangerous as a toddler with scissors. Still, Toni said, I don't see him murdering anyone. Agatha blew out smoke. Me neither. But that doesn't mean the cordial wasn't tampered with. Maybe someone else used it, Toni suggested. Yes, Agatha said slowly. Someone else. They passed Doris Simpson's house. Doris poked her head out immediately, her gossip radar perfectly tuned. Mrs. Raisin? Toni, heard you were at the pub again. Poor Ivy, crying her eyes out. We know, Agatha said curtly. Doris clucked sympathetically. I hope she didn't do anything silly. She's such a tender girl. Agatha narrowed her eyes. Did you see her crying? Behind the pub, yes, Doris said. Just after the body was taken away. She looked terrified. Terrified of what? Toni asked. Hard to say, Doris replied. Guilt or fear, they look much the same on most people. With that sage comment, she retreated indoors. Agatha sighed. The whole village is useless. Not entirely, Toni said. We know Pym cheated her father. We know he planned to sell the miniature behind her back. And we know she argued with him minutes before the event, but she left the room. Agatha nodded grudgingly. She did, and too many witnesses confirmed it. So she's a red herring, Toni said gently. Or a pink one, Agatha muttered. She's emotional, not murderous. They turned onto the lane leading to Carsely's centre. The low stone walls glistened from rain, and smoke drifted from cottage chimneys. A tractor grumbled somewhere in the distance. Agatha walked in silence for a few moments, the cigarette crackling faintly. Charles, she muttered, that fool. You like him, Toni said with a hint of mischief. I do not, Agatha snapped. You do, Toni said, just not in ways you want to admit. Agatha huffed. Charles is decorative, like curtains. Nice to look at, not terribly useful. We'll see, Toni said. Agatha eyed her suspiciously. Toni had a knack for spotting emotional truths Agatha was determined to avoid. They reached the office. Hodge sat on the windowsill, tail twitching, as if annoyed they'd taken so long to return to their duties. Agatha unlocked the door. Right, we're visiting Charles first thing tomorrow. Now? Toni asked. Yes, Agatha declared. He gave Pym a drink. That alone warrants interrogation. Toni smiled faintly. Gently this time. Possibly, Agatha conceded, if he's lucky. She lit another cigarette, the flame briefly brightening the dim afternoon. Come on, she said, marching onward. Let's see what that aristocratic nuisance has to say for himself. Behind them, Hodge yawned with majestic disdain, entirely unimpressed by the murder unfolding in Carsely and Agatha's relentless determination to solve it. A thin, petulant rain clung to Carsely the next morning, blurring the hedgerows and turning every lane into a glistening ribbon. Agatha Raisin strode toward Charles Frayth's manor with the sort of determination usually reserved for tax auditors and furious vicars. Toni walked beside her with quiet caution, clutching her notebook as though it were a shield. You don't have to accuse him immediately, Toni said, dodging a puddle. I do, Agatha replied. Otherwise he'll charm his way out of it before he's even in it. He might be innocent. Toni, Agatha said, lighting a cigarette, Charles Frayth is always innocent, and somehow always involved. They turned up the gravel drive toward Charles's large Honeystone manor. The windows glowed warmly, smoke rising from the chimneys in 3 elegant curls. The garden looked immaculate in a way only gardens tended by paid staff ever did. Agatha scowled. She hated when everything in Charles's world looked perfect, especially when hers resembled the back room of a charity shop. She banged the brass knocker loudly. The door opened to reveal Charles Frayth, dressed in a soft jumper and tailored trousers, looking infuriatingly rested. He smiled lazily. Agatha, Toni, do come in before you drown in melodrama. You gave Pym a drink, Agatha snapped. Ah, Charles said pleasantly. Straight to the accusations. You must be feeling like yourself again. Agatha shoved past him into the hallway. Toni offered Charles an apologetic smile and followed. The manor's entrance was all polished oak floors and tasteful artwork. Exactly the sort of setting where Agatha always felt 5 minutes from knocking over something valuable. Charles led them to the sitting room, where a fire crackled and a plate of shortbread sat untouched. Agatha planted her hands on her hips. Did you poison Leonard Pym? Charles blinked. Good morning to you too. Answer, Agatha demanded. He sank onto a sofa with the serene air of a man wrongly suspected at least twice a month. Of course I didn't poison him. I simply offered the man a drink because he was making everyone miserable. What drink? Toni asked kindly. A cordial, Charles said. Vintage. My aunt sent it from Scotland. I brought it as a joke gift for Pym, seeing as his personality contained no joy whatsoever. Agatha's eyes narrowed. Why would he accept it? Because I told him it was free, Charles said with a shrug, and because even misers enjoy novelty. Agatha paced. You brought a bottle of cordial. You handed it to him, and shortly afterwards he dropped dead. From poison, Charles corrected, not cordial. Bill tested the bottle this morning, nothing suspicious inside. Agatha had not heard that, and it annoyed her deeply. Why didn't you tell me? Because, Charles said, pouring himself tea, I enjoy having secrets from you. It's healthy. You're insufferable, and yet you keep visiting. Toni stepped in before Agatha throttled him. Can you tell us when you left the bottle unattended? Briefly, Charles said. I set it on the table beside Pym's papers while greeting Mrs. Mason. When I turned back, Pym was already fiddling with the stopper. Agatha froze. So anyone could have tampered with it. Precisely, Charles said, but Bill tested the bottle, so if poison was added, it wasn't the cordial. Agatha folded her arms. Then what did he drink? Charles frowned. I assumed it was the cordial, but if not, someone used his own tumbler, Toni said quietly. Ivy said it was wiped clean. Agatha nodded slowly. Someone slipped poison into Pym's personal glass. Something he trusted. Charles leaned back. Well, he trusted very little, but he did carry a silver flask. He used it when pretending to be more refined than he was. Agatha paused. Flask? Yes, Charles said. He kept it in his inside pocket. Said it held superior spirits. I always thought it held something ghastly from a discount shop. Agatha exchanged a look with Toni. We didn't see a flask at the pub. Then someone removed it, Charles said calmly. Perhaps the police. Bill said nothing about one, Toni murmured. Agatha grinned suddenly. Charles, for once you're useful. High praise, Charles said dryly. Agatha sat opposite him. You called Ivy the poor girl yesterday. Charles shrugged. She is poor, and a girl, and frightened. I rather like her. You didn't look as sympathetic when we mentioned Malcolm Jenkin, Agatha observed. Charles's mouth twitched. I don't like dealers who pretend to be gentlemen. Jenkin is a vulture, always has been. You think he's capable of murder? Agatha pressed. Capable, Charles mused. Yes. Competent? Absolutely not. Agatha snorted. She hated agreeing with him. Toni leaned forward. Charles, when you gave Pym the cordial, did he mock you? Of course, Charles said. It was Pym. He sneered something about aristocratic indulgences. I ignored him. Did anyone else approach the table around that time? Toni asked. Charles thought for a moment. Mrs. Swithins came by to complain about a valuation. Jenkin hovered in the doorway, and Ivy passed through with a tray. So half the pub, Agatha muttered. Exactly, Charles said, which means I'm hardly the prime suspect. You're still on the list, Agatha told him. You've had me on list since we met, he replied cheerfully. Agatha huffed. She hated when he was right with that smug little smile. Toni stood. Thank you, Charles. This helps a great deal. My pleasure, Charles said. Then, with a sly glance at Agatha, do stay for lunch. I've a new cook who makes excellent pheasant. We're investigating a murder, Agatha snapped. You can investigate after pheasant. No. There's wine. Agatha hesitated. Toni tugged her sleeve gently. Agatha. Fine, Agatha said. We're leaving, but only because time is of the essence. Charles smirked as they walked out. Outside, the drizzle had strengthened. Agatha lit a cigarette immediately. Toni tucked her hair behind her ears. He's telling the truth. He always is, annoyingly, Agatha admitted. So the bottle is a red herring. Yes, Agatha muttered, but he's right about the flask, that's new. They reached the gravel drive. A gardener nodded politely at them, pretending not to have overheard Charles's theatrical charm. He thinks Ivy's innocent, Toni said. Everyone thinks Ivy's innocent, Agatha replied, which either means she is, or she's an excellent liar. Toni shot her a look. Agatha. Fine, Agatha conceded. She's more scared than sly. They turned back toward the village. The hedgerows looked darker now, heavy with rain. Small rivulets trickled down the lane. "Someone tampered with Pym's personal tumbler," Toni said quietly. "Not the bottle Charles brought." "Exactly," Agatha said. "We've been wrong about the delivery method. So we need to know who was close enough to put something in his own glass." Which, Agatha grumbled, was probably sitting right next to him. They passed the WI hall, its windows fogged with activity, ladies bustling about with tea towels and gossip. Agatha shuddered. She had no desire to be reminded of her floral arrangement fiasco. As they neared Carsely Centre, Doris Simpson stepped out of the village shop carrying 2 bags of cat food. "Mrs. Raisin," she called, "you'll want to hear this." Agatha groaned softly. "What now?" Doris leaned in conspiratorially. "When that Pym fellow was arguing with Toni the other day, you remember?" Toni blushed. "He wasn't arguing exactly." "He was," Agatha said. "Well," Doris continued importantly, "I saw something. He had a polished silver flask sticking out of his blazer pocket. Flashy thing, like a prop off the telly." Agatha froze. "A flask?" "Yes, during the argument. He kept patting it, like he was checking it was still there." Toni paled. "And we didn't see it at the pub?" "No," Doris said, "so whoever poisoned him probably took it." Agatha felt a thrill of vindication. "Thank you, Doris." "Oh, it's nothing," Doris said, clearly thrilled. "Always happy to help justice and so on." Agatha dragged Toni toward the lane before Doris could begin another saga. "This is it," Agatha said, almost breathless. "Someone poisoned the drink inside Pym's flask. Not Charles's cordial, not anything handed over publicly. Something private, something he trusted." Toni nodded slowly. "And something he kept in his pocket." Agatha grinned. "Which means only one type of person could tamper with it." "Someone who got close enough," Toni murmured. "Or someone who knew he always carried it," Agatha said. "Someone who knew his habits." They reached the office. The sky had darkened to charcoal. Hodge was in the window again, tail twitching like an impatient metronome. "We need Bill," Toni said. "We need the flask first," Agatha replied. "Then we need Bill." She exhaled a long plume of smoke, the drizzle hissing as it hit the tip of her cigarette. "Someone in Carsely is cleverer than they look," Agatha said, "and that is deeply irritating." Hodge yawned in the window, unimpressed. Agatha flicked ash to the side. "Come on, the next suspect won't interrogate themselves." Together, they stepped into the dim office, the door creaking closed behind them as the rain began to fall harder, steady, cold, and full of impending revelations. A hard rain hammered Carsely the next morning, the sort that rattled gutters and soaked trousers within seconds. Agatha Raisin stood outside the Mercester police station like a disgruntled crow, cigarette clamped between her fingers, coat clinging damply to her frame. Toni, sensible creature that she was, huddled under a small umbrella, her neat ponytail dripping at the ends. "Bill's late," Agatha muttered, tapping ash onto the pavement. "It's only 9 o'clock, Toni said. He said morning, not first thing." Agatha snorted. "He should know better than to keep me waiting. There's a murderer loose and my mascara's running." Just then the door opened and Detective Sergeant Bill Wong stepped out, holding a stack of papers and wearing the weary patience of a man who had already drunk 2 cups of tea and regretted both. "Agatha," Bill said with a sigh. "Toni, thank you for coming." Agatha breezed past him into the station. "You're welcome. We're here to help." "I said limited access," Bill reminded her. "Emphasis on limited." "Don't fuss," Agatha said. "We're professionals." Toni hid a smile. Bill ushered them into an evidence room, a chilly little space with metal cabinets, a humming strip light, and a faint smell of stale coffee. Bill placed a sealed plastic bag on the table. Inside was a polished silver flask. "This," Bill said, "was found under a stack of Pym's papers. Looks like someone shoved it aside during the chaos. It wasn't noticed until last night." Agatha leaned in. "The flask he kept in his pocket." "Yes," Bill replied. "The lab wiped it down and then dusted for prints. It had 4 distinct sets." "4?" Toni asked. "Pym's, of course," Bill said. "One partial belonging to Ivy, likely from handling his blazer during the emergency. One belonging to Pym's assistant in Mercester, who confirmed cleaning it ages ago. But the final set," he paused. Agatha felt her pulse quicken. "Whose?" Bill looked at her. "Nora Tudge." Agatha blinked. Twice. Nora, sweet little Nora with the teapots and cat ornaments, Nora with the knitted tissue box covers. That Nora, Bill said. Toni, will you check the sheet? Toni scanned the evidence forms quickly. Her fingerprints match in 3 places, one full print near the cap. Agatha stared. Nora Tudge handling Pym's flask makes no sense. Oh, but it does, Bill said quietly, because she also visited Pym the night he died. Agatha gaped at him. She told us she didn't go anywhere in the evenings. She lied, Bill replied, and I need you both to confirm if she said anything else suspicious. Agatha stood abruptly. Right, we're going to Nora, now. Bill held up a warning hand. Agatha, don't frighten her, and don't accuse her. Have I ever? Yes, Toni and Bill said in unison. Agatha huffed, stubbed out her cigarette under her heel, and stormed out. The rain was relentless as they arrived at Nora Tudge's cottage. Agatha banged on the door and Nora opened it almost immediately, eyes puffy, cardigan askew, looking like someone who had cried herself into a headache. Mrs. Raisin, she whispered. Toni, why are you? You lied to us, Agatha said briskly. Agatha, Toni hissed. Well, she did, Agatha snapped. May we come in, Nora? Nora hesitated, then stepped aside. Her cottage was as cluttered as ever, but today it smelled faintly of lavender polish and damp wool. A kettle whistled sadly on the stove. Agatha didn't wait. Your fingerprints were on Pym's flask. Nora froze, her pink-rimmed eyes widening. Oh dear, I knew this would happen. You'd better start explaining, Agatha said. Nora sank into her armchair, clutching a cushion shaped like a calico cat. I did go to see him last night, she whispered. But I didn't kill him. I swear on Harold's memory. Toni sat opposite her, voice soft. Start from the beginning. Nora dabbed her eyes again. I wanted a refund. For the locket. And for some of the other nonsense he forced me to buy. I'd been thinking about it all day. After the WI ladies gossiped about his valuation night, I realized he'd be in the pub with money on his mind. I thought, perhaps he'd be kinder outside the shop. Kindness wasn't in his vocabulary, Agatha muttered. Nora nodded miserably. I arrived just before the event started. He was already flustered, papers everywhere, muttering about idiots with heirlooms. I told him I needed my money back. He laughed, called me weak, said Harold had been a fool. Toni winced. That must have been awful. I was shaking, Nora whispered. I knocked into the table. His flask fell. He grabbed my wrist so tightly She broke off, trembling. Agatha felt a surprising stab of anger on Nora's behalf. He told me to stop bothering him, Nora continued. Told me to go home and knit something. I felt humiliated. I snatched up the flask without thinking and shouted that he was a bully. Then I ran. You took his flask? Agatha asked sharply. No, Nora squeaked. I dropped it outside the door. I heard it clatter. I didn't want it. I only grabbed it because I wanted to hurt him somehow. But I'm not a thief. Agatha watched closely. Nora was trembling, but no signs of deception flickered in her eyes. And you left him alive? Toni asked gently. Yes, Nora whispered. He was standing, yelling, very much alive. Toni exchanged a glance with Agatha. This felt true. Agatha sat back. But you said nothing about this yesterday. Because I was ashamed, Nora whispered. And because he wasn't alone. Agatha stiffened. Not alone, Nora nodded. Someone else arrived after me. Just as I reached the lane, a voice, firm, sharp. I recognized it. Whose voice? Agatha demanded. Nora swallowed. Someone with authority. Someone Pym feared. That's why I ran faster. Who? Agatha pressed. Nora shook her head. I couldn't see them, but I heard him say, not here, not now. Agatha stood. Rain thudded at the window, thunder murmured far away. This is important, Nora. Very important. I know, she whispered, but I didn't poison him. Toni touched her arm. We believe you. Agatha hesitated, then nodded stiffly. Yes, for now. They left Nora's cottage and stepped into the rain again. Well? Toni asked. Agatha lit a cigarette, shielding the flame. She's not lying. Agreed. Which means someone else visited him, Agatha said. Someone who frightened him. Someone he'd normally obey, Toni murmured. Agatha exhaled smoke. Right, let's think. But Toni wasn't thinking about the visitor. Her eyes had narrowed in a very different way. "There's something odd in the ledger," Toni said. "About the miniature." "The one Ivy inherited?" "Yes," Toni said. "But Pym's ledger doesn't match Ivy's story." Agatha frowned. "Explain." "The ledger shows the miniature came from a private seller," Toni said. "But there's no name, just initials. And the signature. It doesn't match Ivy's father's handwriting. I checked against the note Ivy showed us." Agatha felt excitement spark. "Whose handwriting does it match?" Toni hesitated. "Mrs. Swithin's." Agatha nearly choked on her cigarette. "Mrs. Swithin's? The Queen of WI biscuit judging? That Mrs. Swithin's?" "Yes," Toni said. "The same Mrs. Swithin's who brought that undervalued brooch. The same one furious at Pym yesterday." Agatha blinked at the rain, astonished. "She sold the miniature decades ago, secretly, and lied about it." "Yes," Toni said softly. "And if Pym knew," Agatha finished for her, "he could expose her, humiliate her, destroy her precious reputation." Toni nodded. "Her motive isn't money, it's shame." Agatha felt a chill. A motive far stronger than greed. They walked briskly down the lane, water splashing under their shoes. The sky darkened further, heavy with storm. "We need to confront her," Agatha said. "Immediately." Toni agreed. "She'll deny it." "They always do," Agatha muttered, lighting another cigarette. "But shame leaves cracks." They reached the edge of the village when Bill Wong's patrol car pulled up beside them, spraying water. Bill rolled down the window, looking tense. "Get in," he said sharply. "Now." Agatha climbed in without argument, Toni following quickly. "What's happened?" Agatha demanded. Bill glanced at them grimly. "Mrs. Swithin's." "What about her?" Agatha asked. "She's vanished," Bill said. "Left her house unlocked, purse on the table, car in the drive." Toni's breath caught. "And the miniature?" Bill shook his head. "No sign of it." Agatha stared through the rain-splattered windscreen as Bill pulled away. Mrs. Swithin's, the quietest, most self-righteous woman in Carsely, had disappeared. Which meant one thing: she had something worth hiding, and quite possibly something worth killing for. The rain had finally exhausted itself by late afternoon, leaving Carsely rinsed clean and faintly sparkling under a washed-out sun. Puddles gleamed like puddles always did in the village, half nuisance, half decoration, and the hedgerows dripped rhythmically. Agatha Raisin marched with purpose toward the allotments at the far end of the village, Toni beside her, Bill Wong striding ahead with the grim calm of someone who knew exactly what he would find. The allotments were quiet at this hour. Most villagers had retreated home for tea, leaving the grassy paths and small wooden sheds bathed in golden light. A wood pigeon cooed from a fence post. Rows of stubborn winter greens flashed dull silver under the sinking sun. It was peaceful, deceptively so. Agatha spotted her immediately. Mrs. Swithin stood rigidly beside her shed, the door open behind her as though she'd been packing, or perhaps dithering. Her cardigan hung unevenly, her floral skirt was muddied. In her hands, clutched tightly enough to whiten her knuckles, was a small packet wrapped in brown paper. Not running, not hiding, just waiting. "She looks dreadful," Toni whispered. "Good," Agatha muttered, lighting a cigarette. "Makes my job easier." Bill approached first. "Mrs. Swithin's," he called gently. "We need to talk." She did not flinch. Instead, she drew herself upright, chin trembling but determined. "You already know," she said softly. "There's no point pretending." Bill slowed. "We know you vanished. We know you had the miniature. We need to hear the rest from you." Mrs. Swithin's looked past him to Agatha and Toni. Her eyes, sharp for WI judging but exhausted now, lingered particularly on Toni. "It was never supposed to touch any of you," she murmured. "Especially not you, dear." Agatha bristled. Typical. Everyone adored Toni instantly. She stepped beside Bill, blowing smoke into the cool air. "Tell us everything." For a moment Mrs. Swithin's hesitated. Then, with a sigh of surrender, she opened the brown paper in her hands. Inside was the blackwood miniature. The painted surface caught the last rays of sunlight, a delicate, centuries-old portrait no larger than a palm, its details hauntingly vivid even under grime. Toni inhaled softly. Agatha felt a flicker of awe despite herself. Start at the beginning, Bill said gently. Mrs. Swithin shut her eyes. It was decades ago. My husband, dear Gerald, found it. Not in a glamorous way, you understand. It was in a box of things left at the church jumble. No one claimed it. Gerald thought it looked odd. Valuable, perhaps. He brought it home. Agatha frowned. Why didn't you tell anyone? Because Gerald was gambling then, she whispered. He owed money. People in Carsely would have talked. They always do. I was terrified. Embarrassment is unbearable. Agatha felt an unexpected flick of sympathy. She knew better than most what it meant to fear the villagers' gaze. Mrs. Swithin's continued, voice wavering. We needed money, so I approached Pym. He wasn't established then, just a clever young man with sharp eyes. He bought the miniature at a fraction of its worth. I inherited the miniature, you see. Dad bought it years ago from Pym. He thought he'd got a bargain. Dad never knew Pym had actually bought it from someone else before that. I didn't know how rare it was. Not really. But I suspected. And when Gerald died, I wished I'd kept it. I felt ashamed. Ashamed enough to lie, Agatha said. Mrs. Swithin's nodded miserably. When Ivy Cartwright's father heard rumours about the miniature, he confronted Pym. Pym panicked. He said the signature on the sale had been forged. He blamed Ivy's father, said the man was trying to claim it fraudulently, and I— You let him, Toni said softly. Mrs. Swithin's lower lip trembled. I was petrified. The Cartwright family was respected. If they'd known I'd sold something from the church jumble, something valuable, oh, the shame would have ruined me. So I stayed silent. Ivy's father was humiliated. Pym enjoyed it. He always enjoyed hurting people. A gust of wind rushed through the allotments, shaking the bare branches and ruffling the edges of her skirt. Agatha flicked her cigarette away. And recently? Recently, Mrs. Swithin said, tightening her grip on the miniature. Pym became bolder. He said he'd found out the miniature had resurfaced and knew exactly how it had first left Carsely. He wanted me to assist him with selling several worthless items to wealthy collectors. Threatened me. Said he'd expose everything. Said the WI would eat me alive. Agatha grimaced. He wasn't wrong. Mrs. Swithin's let out a strangled laugh. He hinted he might reveal everything at the valuation night, that if I didn't help, he'd tell the entire pub how I'd sold church property to cover gambling debts. He brandished his flask at me, said he would toast to my downfall. And so you poisoned him, Bill said quietly. Mrs. Swithin sagged, shoulders collapsing. Yes, I did. Toni inhaled sharply. When? Agatha demanded. Earlier that afternoon, Mrs. Swithin's whispered. He always visited Mercester before one of his little performances. I waited outside his shop, told him I wanted to inspect something he'd promised to sell. He sneered but let me in. When he stepped away to answer the telephone, boasting to some collector no doubt, I used the moment. She swallowed, looking physically sick. Pym kept his flask on the counter. He always used it after belittling people. Ritualistic almost. I slipped the poison into it. Something mild, something fast. I'd taken it from Gerald's old gardening shed. It was meant for pests. I didn't think. You thought enough to kill him, Agatha said. Her tone was sharp, but not cruel. I didn't want him dead, Mrs. Swithin's whispered. I wanted him silent. I wanted him frightened. But poison doesn't frighten. It ends. Silence pressed against the allotments. Even the wood pigeon seemed to have stopped its moaning. Bill stepped forward. Mrs. Swithin's, I have to caution you. I know, Bill, she murmured. I've been preparing myself since I left home this morning. Toni's voice was soft. Why now? Why run to the allotments? Mrs. Swithin's looked around the quiet rows of cabbages and sleeping plots. It was Gerald's favourite place. He said vegetables never judged you. I didn't have anywhere else to go. Agatha felt an unexpected twist in her chest. Mrs. Swithin's extended the miniature with shaking hands. I found it among Pym's stock. He kept it wrapped away, waiting to profit from it. I didn't know whether to bring it to you or burn it. I'm sorry. I truly am. Bill took the miniature gently and signalled to the officers waiting by the gate. Mrs. Swithin's, he said softly, I'm arresting you on suspicion of murder. She nodded, relief and devastation braided together across her features. As the officers escorted her toward the lane, Toni stood very still. Her eyes were glossy in the golden light. Agatha watched her carefully. Are you all right? Toni shook her head. She wasn't a monster, just someone cornered, someone ashamed. She hurt people, yes, but the way she looked, Agatha finished for her, softly. Human. Toni exhaled shakily. This job is harder than I imagined. Of course it is, Agatha said. If it were easy, Carsely would be littered with private detectives. Am I really cut out for this? Toni whispered. Agatha looked at her for a long moment. The girl stood there in the allotments, hair damp from earlier rain, hands tucked in her pockets, empathy written across her face. Toni wasn't hardened, but she wasn't fragile either. She saw people, their flaws, their fears, the way Agatha often missed in her rush toward the nearest clue. Too late, Agatha said at last. You already are. Toni blinked, then let out a small, wobbly laugh. You always say things like that when you don't want to admit you care. Agatha sniffed. Nonsense, I'm terribly honest. You're terribly something, Toni replied. Bill walked back toward them, sliding the miniature into an evidence bag. Agatha, he said, for once, no lectures. You two actually helped. Agatha lifted her chin. We always help. You just rarely appreciate it. He shook his head fondly. Go home, get warm, and don't interrogate anyone else tonight. I make no promises, Agatha said. Bill sighed, entirely unsurprised. They walked back into Carsely as the sun dipped behind the cottages. The last of the daylight brushed the honeystone walls with a soft glow. Smoke curled from chimneys. Someone was burning damp wood, giving the air that comforting, earthy scent of early winter. Agatha felt suddenly tired, bone-tired, but in a strangely peaceful way. At her cottage, Hodge sat in the window, tail flicking with disdain. Clearly unimpressed she'd been gone so long. Inside, she kicked off her shoes and poured herself a generous gin. Toni hovered in the doorway. You should go home, Agatha said, sinking into her armchair. You look exhausted. You look worse, Toni said, smiling faintly. Agatha smirked. Flattery from the young, almost forgivable. Toni hesitated. Agatha, thank you for believing me and for everything today. Go on before I get sentimental, Agatha said, waving her off. It's undignified. Toni laughed and let herself out. Agatha leaned back, lighting a cigarette. Smoke curled lazily toward the ceiling. The room felt warm, quiet, safe. Hodge hopped onto the armrest, curling his tail neatly against her sleeve. You didn't solve anything, Agatha told him. Useless creature. Hodge purred nonetheless. The faint glow of the street lamp illuminated the drizzle beginning again outside. A soft, persistent tapping began against the window, Carsely's nightly reminder that quiet never lasted long. Agatha exhaled smoke, closing her eyes briefly. Another murder solved, another tangle of secrets, shame, villagers and gossip unravelled, and beside her, Hodge stretched with feline indifference, the perfect, ordinary ending she secretly loved. Carsely had a habit of returning to normal with indecent speed. Murder today, bake sale tomorrow. By the following afternoon, the village square hummed with gossip, kettles whistled behind half-open doors, and the drizzle resumed its loyal post along the roof lines. Even the Red Lion had regained its usual perfume of beer mats, damp coats, and mild scandal. Agatha Raisin pushed open the pub door with the air of a woman entering a room where applause might break out at any moment. Nobody applauded, but several villagers nudged one another, whispering, "There she is," with the same excitement usually reserved for runaway heifers. She pretended not to notice, which meant she noticed everything. Bill Wong was at the bar in conversation with the landlord. A few stools away, Toni perched delicately, nursing a lemonade. The girl looked tired but composed, far more composed than Agatha remembered being at her age. Not that she would ever admit that. "Ah, the heroines of the hour," declared Roy Silver, appearing from behind a pillar like a brightly dressed jack-in-the-box. His scarf trailed dramatically. Carsely's very own crime-busting duo. "Don't be ridiculous," Agatha snapped, though she allowed herself a tiny, victorious lift of the chin. "We merely assisted." Roy's eyes sparkled. "Sweetheart, the entire pub is convinced you practically leapt onto a table and declared the solution." "Only because there wasn't a chair handy," Agatha muttered. She marched over to Toni, ignoring Roy's delighted cackle. "You look miserable. Why?" Toni shook her head. "I don't. Just thinking." "Dangerous habit," Agatha said. "People start expecting things of you." But there was warmth behind the words, a tenderness she would rather swallow a hedgehog than acknowledge. Across the bar, Doris Simpson loudly recounted the events of the valuation night. Only this time, Agatha noticed with irritation, Doris portrayed herself as a key witness who had suspected something was off all along. She didn't suspect anything, Agatha growled under her breath. She thought the commotion was because someone spilled cider. Well, you did look rather flustered, Toni offered gently. Agatha inhaled sharply. I was not flustered. That was heat, and poor ventilation, and a deeply unprofessional microphone. Of course, Toni said, smiling. Bill approached, his expression a mixture of amusement and weariness. Ladies, just wanted to say thank you again, officially. Agatha puffed up. I should hope so. And, Bill added carefully, Toni's statements were especially helpful. Agatha froze. Several villagers glanced over. Her pride battled her vanity, then her ego, then her instinct for self-preservation. It was a vicious brawl. She settled on a stiff nod. Yes, well, the girl notices things. Occasionally. Toni blushed pink. Agatha. Must be the heating, Agatha cut in, waving a dismissive hand. This place is like a greenhouse. Mrs. Blocksby slipped quietly into the pub, radiating her usual serene calm. She joined them at the bar. My dears, she said, smiling softly, I'm so relieved it's over. Agatha gave a regal shrug. Naturally it's over. Once I'm involved. It was Toni's gentle questioning that helped Mrs. Swithins open up. Mrs. Blocksby continued, patting Toni's shoulder. Quite a gift, my dear. Toni ducked her head. Agatha cleared her throat pointedly, but Mrs. Blocksby only offered that infuriatingly kind smile. And you, Agatha, she added gently, showed admirable restraint at the end. Agatha nearly choked on the lemon slice in her gin. Restraint? I don't do restraint. You did yesterday, Mrs. Blocksby said, and it was rather touching. Agatha felt heat creep up her neck. She paid the moment the respect it deserved by pretending it had never happened. Anyone want crisps? She barked. By early evening the drizzle had thickened, streaking the windows in grey curtains. Agatha returned home through the glistening lanes, feeling slightly more worn than she liked. Murder investigations were exhausting. Worse, they were emotionally exhausting, though she'd never admit that out loud. Inside her cottage, warmth greeted her in a rush. Hodge lay sprawled across her desk like a small, furry emperor, shedding hair with the precision of a sniper. Her notes, meticulously compiled, then repeatedly stolen back from Toni's tidier system, were now completely obscured by tabby fur. You do that on purpose, Agatha informed him, dropping her handbag. Hodge blinked with regal indifference. She lit a cigarette, the flame hissing softly. The familiar scent curled through the room, grounding her. She sank into the armchair and exhaled slowly. Pride tugged at her chest, surprising in its steadiness. Toni had handled herself with calm skill, and Agatha wasn't entirely sure whether to feel threatened or proud. Both, perhaps. She'd been thinking about it since yesterday, seeing Toni in the allotments, eyes bright with compassion as Mrs. Swithins confessed everything. Compassion wasn't Agatha's strong suit. Determination, yes. Tenacity, absolutely. Compassion, less so. But Toni had it, and that was its own power. Before she could sink too deeply into reflection, a brisk knock rattled the front door. If that's Doris wanting an interview, Agatha muttered, stomping toward the hall, I swear I'll... She flung open the door. Toni stood there, hair damp from drizzle, holding a paper-wrapped parcel. The warm scent of chips drifted upward. I brought dinner, she announced. Thought you might not have eaten. I have eaten, Agatha said immediately. Toni raised an eyebrow. Have you? Well, Agatha wavered. I was planning to. Toni brushed past her into the cottage. Salt and vinegar, she said, placing the parcel on the table. And a pickled onion because Bill says you secretly like them. I do not, Agatha snapped, already reaching for it. The two of them settled at the small kitchen table, steam rising from the chips. Rain pattered gently against the window, the sound soft and rhythmic. After a moment, Toni said quietly, I want to stay on. At the agency, I mean. Agatha's hand paused mid-reach. A flicker of warmth shot through her before she crushed it under stern professionalism. Well, she said, clearing her throat, I suppose you're adequate. Toni snorted. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me. Don't get used to it, Agatha warned, stabbing a chip. I run a serious investigative agency. Standards must remain high. Of course, Toni said. Next time I'll try to let you solve the case first. Agatha glared. Cheeky, Toni grinned. True. The warmth in the room expanded, settling around them like an old blanket. Fine, Agatha said at last. You can stay. But I'm in charge. Naturally. And I get first pick of interesting clients. Obviously. And, Agatha, Toni said gently, thank you. Agatha felt something in her chest tighten, then loosen. All right, enough of that. Eat your chips. Minutes passed in companionable silence. Hodge wandered into the doorway, stretching luxuriously before hopping onto the nearest chair. His tail flicked with smug satisfaction, as though he had arranged the entire outcome himself. Agatha reached over to scratch behind his ears. Don't look so pleased, she muttered. There'll be another case soon enough, and then you'll complain I'm never home. Hodge purred anyway. Outside, the drizzle shifted to a soft rain. The village lights glimmered across the wet street. Carsely was back to normal, or as normal as any village could be with Agatha Raisin in residence. Agatha leaned back, cigarette glowing faintly in the dim room. The case was over, order restored, Toni safe. And for once she felt quietly content, an emotion she would deny, of course, until her dying breath. Hodge rolled onto his side, stretching with theatrical laziness. Agatha smirked. Show off. The cat flicked his tail, and somewhere in the darkened village beyond, a kettle whistled, a curtain twitched, and the faint rustle of gossip hinted that Carsely would never stay quiet for long. A comforting thought, really.